something or other, third, I guess.
It was third.
1995. We're here at Lane Place, the home of the Montgomery County Historical Society. And part of the program of the Historical Society has been to store up memories of veterans who served in World War II. One of the people who's come to our attention is Bill Broshears. Bill has an exhibit, or is a part of an exhibit. His memorabilia is a part of an exhibit going on at the present time up at the Linden Library. That's how he happened to come to our attention. Bill, I think we'll get started with you now, and the name Broshears isn't easy to spell.
No.
Give us your full name and
Okay.
tell us something about where you live and who you are.
My name is William Lee Broshears, Jr. I'm originally from Sullivan, Indiana. I was born in 1925 and graduated from high school in Sullivan in 1943. I moved to Crawfordsville in 1954. So we've lived here slightly over 40 years.
Bill, I said your name is hard to spell. Spell it, will you?
Broshears, just like it sounds.
Okay. And you grew up in Sullivan, not Crawfordsville.
Yes, I grew up Sullivan. I was in Sullivan until I graduated from high school. Went in the service immediately, and went back only summers probably while I was in college. Was married.
So you entered the service from Sullivan, and where did you go from there?
Well, from Sullivan, I went to Fort Benjamin Harrison by bus.
Were you drafted, or you were?
Yes, I was drafted. I volunteered for the draft. When I enlisted in the Air Corps, they told me to go in the back of my draft board, volunteer for the draft, and then I would be taken care of from then on as far as the Air Corps went. And I went to Fort Benjamin Harrison by bus, got on a troop train somewhere around midnight that night after some processing, and wound up the next day in Biloxi, Mississippi for basic training.
What month? When?
This was in October of 1943.
Mm-hmm. And you got down to Biloxi, and what happened there?
I was basic training there for 6 weeks. Got all my shots, got the usual haircut, and it was a 6-week general basic training for Air Force.
And were you among a lot of other fellows just out of high school?
A few older fellows. Most fellows were fresh out of high school, 18-year-olds.
Were you in good physical shape when you got there?
Oh yes.
You were in better physical shape when you got done with basic training?
Probably. I probably only weighed about 110 pounds when I entered the service.
My goodness, that's pretty much.
I'm rather small.
Where did you go from Biloxi then?
From Biloxi, I went to Maxwell Field in Birmingham, Alabama for pre-flight training. This was a program that, you went to ground school, they tested you for what you eventually were going to be. I mean, you had 3 categories of what you were going to be. You were either going to be a pilot, a bombardier, or a navigator. And they ran a lot of psychological tests, dexterity tests, and things like that. And that may have been about a 6-week program too. I can't remember exactly.
So what category did you wind up in?
I wound up as qualified to be a bombardier.
Mm-hmm. And when did you start your bombardier training?
Not for a little while after that. There were steps in between. I went from there to George Peabody College in Nashville, Tennessee, for what the Air Force called as a college training detachment. Everybody in the cadet program went through that. We took math courses, English courses, just a general preparatory course of some sort. And most of it was just little educational training. Really not, well, we had military training too. I don't know how long, I can't tell you how long that lasted. But after that then, I think everybody in the cadet program eventually had to go through aerial gunnery school. And,
Gunner school.
yeah. And that's where I went from Nashville to Panama City, Florida. I forget the name of the air base now, but we took aerial gunnery training in B-17. So, to go back to Nashville was my first experience to even be close to an airplane. I mean, I was a small town boy, and the only ones I saw were flying over at a high altitude. And we had 7 hours of flying training in Barrancas, which was like a Piper Cub.
Did you learn to fly?
Oh yeah, first
operating an airplane.
First hour of training, we practiced takeoffs and landings. And you know, I hadn't even driven a car at that point in time, let alone be in an airplane. And so I had 7 hours of flight training. And if you got to your 8th hour, you were allowed to solo, but due to weather and things like that, I think I wound up with about 7 hours of flying training.
But you never soloed?
No.
Okay, well, let's go on.
As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a little story about this. My pilot instructor asked me at one point during our training, said, "What are you qualified to be?" And I said, "Bombardier." He said, "Thank God." my pilot skills were evidently not too good.
Okay, let's go on from there, Bill.
Okay. And now after aerial gunnery school, I was on a troop train for about a week, it seemed like, from Panama City, Florida to Victorville, California, which is on the edge of the Mojave Desert. And that was one of, I think, about 3 bombardier schools in the United States. And that training probably lasted about 5 months. It was where you actually flew in. It was in a training plane, a small 2-engine plane. Actually flew and dropped bombs. They were 100-pound bombs with a little charge of black powder in the nose, so that you could see where it hit. They had targets, and also the other bombardier cadet would be in the back with an open hatch and a camera. And at the instant of impact, he was supposed to take a picture. So it was.
Now you say this. How large planes were they?
These are twin-engine trainers. In fact, they used them for twin-engine or multi-engine pilot training. But they converted these, put a glass nose in it, and equipped it with bomb bays and bomb racks, so that.
So by the time you were done with that course, you were a bombardier.
That's true.
What'd they do with you then?
So that happened at Christmas of '44, and we were in the last class of bombardiers to graduate from Victorville, California. They closed it as far as bombardier school went, and opened it then as a radar school. At that point in time, the plans were, radar had become available, and they thought eventually they would do all bombing by radar. Mm-hmm. So they opened a radar school there, and took half of our bombardier class, kept us there to go to radar school, and the rest then went somewhere as bombardiers. That was probably about a 4-month training program in radar.
So you went on from California. Where'd you ship to?
Well, I stayed there. After I left, after radar school,
Oh, you
Oh,
stayed on
I stayed at the Victorville Air Base
for
radar
radar
school then.
Uh-huh. And how long were you there then?
About 5 months probably.
So that puts you, where are we then in time?
So then we're ready to do something.
Yeah,
Go
what
somewhere.
month would that have been?
Probably in May.
45 already?
Yeah, 45.
Okay. So you're getting in there pretty late.
Right.
Where'd they
Oh,
ship
yeah.
you? Where'd they ship you first?
Well, then I went to various stations. I think I went to Lincoln, Nebraska probably, where I was assigned to a crew. Now this crew was a B-29 crew, and they were already together in Phoenix, or in Tucson, Arizona. And they were already training. And I was the last member of the crew to join the crew as a radar operator. So I eventually then, in just a few days, it was just a matter of being there till they cut all the orders to tell me where I was going. So I joined them then in Tucson. And as a matter of fact, when I got there, the navigator on the crew I was assigned to was from Vincennes, and he and I had gone into service together in basic training and gone through pre-flight at Maxwell Field and the college training at Nashville together. And then he went to navigator school and I went to bombardier school. But we wound up together on the same crew. And my pilot was from Clarksville, Indiana.
Clarksville is down south.
So, yeah, down by New Albany.
Yeah. Okay, where'd you go from there?
From there, we went to Kearney, Nebraska, picked up a brand new B-29, and flew up to Guam.
To Oahu?
Guam.
Whoa, wow.
Well, we did. We flew to San Francisco, then to Hawaii, and then on to Guam.
Mm-hmm.
We made 2 stops. So. And we thought we were pretty lucky. We had a brand new B-29, and we got to Guam. They put us on a C-47 and flew us up to Saipan, and some older crew kept that brand new 29 on Guam. We were all set with a brand new airplane. We thought we had it.
The C, what'd you say it was, a C what?
Oh, when they flew us up to Saipan on was a C-47, which is a transport plane.
The transport plane. That was not an armored plane. That was simply a transport
No,
plane.
that was just
And you went to Saipan.
went to Saipan, which is about 125 miles north of Guam.
Okay.
Saipan, Guam, and Tinian were the 3 islands that the B-29s are based on. And they are all part of the Marianas Island group.
Mm-hmm.
Tinian and Saipan were about 3 miles apart, and Guam was about 125 miles south of there.
Well, I assume you were assigned to another combat plane after you.
Well, it was one of those things where you took what was available,
Uh-huh.
what they assigned you. It may not have been the same plane every time, but
Uh-huh.
so
What kind of again, were they B-29?
they're all B-29s. It was the 20th Air Force, so it consisted of all B-29s.
Mm-hmm. All right, now, did you start seeing any action at that time?
We flew 6 missions before the war ended, because we didn't, see, we were there in July probably, and I think, well, let's see, the first atomic bomb was dropped on August the 6th, but they continued bombing until even a little bit after the second one was dropped, I think, because I think it took the second one to make people realize that, it was over.
Tell us about some of these flights that you took.
Well,
where did you fly over Japan? Or,
oh yeah. It was about from Saipan. Well, the flights varied probably from anywhere. It was about a 14 to 18 hour round trip, according to where you were going. And
what were some of your targets?
I can't remember. We were never over Tokyo. Well, I have been over Tokyo, but not as a target. Most of them were probably in central Japan, on the main island of Honshu. Most of the targets. I think probably Nagoya was one. Others I don't know.
when they set these, how many missions were you on? You said
6.
6. All right. Now, when they assign a mission to you, tell us about how that happens. What do they call you into a briefing room? And,
they advise you by, I don't know how, I suppose somebody came around and told you, or told at least the pilot that you were going to go on such and such a date. Of course, they didn't fly daily because they didn't have the aircraft to do that, or the maintenance to do that. But well, I imagine they maybe flew 2 to 3 times a week, probably.
Would you fly in with how many planes would be in one?
Oh, sometimes you would join up with planes from Tinian, the other bases, and or Guam. Other times it would just be the planes from the group on Saipan.
How many planes in that?
Oh, they would
mission.
They would vary anywhere from whatever they could get in the air, anywhere from 80 to 200 maybe.
Well, B-29, that must have been a sky full.
It was a runway full too. It was a, as I read in my book, the people on the island who were not connected with the B-29s would when there was a mission getting ready to go, would all come out to watch them take off, because it was quite a sight. When you got about 100 or more B-29s lined up on the runway, and they would take off on, they had 2 runways, and they would take off a minute apart, alternating runways at 30-second intervals. And it was an exciting thing.
Lots of noise.
A lot of noise, and of course there, on Saipan and Guam, the runways were so designed that they ended just before the end of the island, because a B-29 fully loaded probably weighed 140,000 pounds, and it was difficult to get it airborne. So at the end of the runway, we had about a 600-foot drop off the end of the island, so you could dip down and pick up airspeed to get. It isn't like a jet today that you get up and go like that.
So you got to go down before you get up.
They went. We had that advantage.
I suppose once in a while some of them didn't make that.
That's true. As a matter of fact, I think in my book they said that they lost 400 and some B-29s, and the B-29s were in the Marianas and bombing Japan for approximately a little over a year, less than a year and a half, a little over a year. I think they lost 400 and some B-29s, and 147 of them to fighters or flak. The rest of them were maintenance problems.
Mishaps. Oh.
The book is very interesting.
You keep talking about the book. What book is
Well, this is a book that my pilot sent me that gives the history of the B-29 and the problems they had with it. It was an inception from probably about 1941, but never flew until maybe 43 or something like that. And I think if I had read the book beforehand, I may never have stepped into one of them with the problems they had, because they had a lot of problems with the engines overheating, and it was a big airplane.
Mm-hmm. They're still flying them though today, aren't they?
No.
Aren't they?
Oh no, they've been super. I think there's one left in flying condition, and that's owned by this Confederate air group.
Air Force, yeah.
Yeah, Confederate Air Force. I think that's the only B-29 left for it. Just the
Well,
one.
tell us a little bit about when you got over Japan. Was there a lot of flak coming up?
Oh no, not at that time. There was very little resistance at that time, because they. Can I look at? I've got some statistics
Sure.
for you.
Go ahead.
They're unbelievable. Just in that period of time, a little over a year, B-29s operating out of the Marianas dropped 170,000 tons of bombs on Japan.
Bombs.
340 million pounds of bombs.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, it was just, it was wiped out. We flew over Tokyo afterwards, and, it was, most of the city was destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the atomic bombs, of course, wiped out a lot of the other two cities, but the rest of them were also.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a big, and by that time, there was very little fighter plane opposition or flying.
There wasn't much fighter plane opposition.
No. Of course, by that time, they also had, we had taken Iwo Jima, which was closer to Japan, and built a runway there for disabled planes to land in emergency, and also for fighter escort. That late in the war, we had fighter escort from Iwo Jima. About the time you get to the coast of Japan, the fighters from Iwo would come up and cover.
Did you ever, at any time, encounter any anti-aircraft fire?
Probably, but I don't. You were so engrossed in, at the time, for the bomb run, which actually would take maybe 4 to 5 minutes, while everybody was so busy.
45 minutes, you said?
4 to 5 minutes.
4 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh,
or whatever, a short period of time. Everybody was so engrossed in what they were doing that.
How many? What would your crew consist of?
We had 11 members. Pilot, co-pilot, bombardier, radio operator, a navigator, a flight engineer, a radar operator.
You were the radar.
I was a radar operator, and the rest were gunners.
What was how do they use the radar on these planes? What do you do with the radar?
Well, you could use the radar to direct the plane on the path to the target. Now, it was not a precise thing. Mm-hmm. All you had was a scope about so big around that would show you just reflections from metallic, a city. You could see the outline of a city. Mm-hmm. But you could actually direct the path of the plane with the radar, and also tell the bombardier when you're over the target, and then they would just toggle the bombs out, as opposed to using a northern bomb sight, which was a little more precise. But they used so many planes in formation, and it was mostly just mass bombing. It was not a precise thing.
No.
The weather was quite a problem there, because you get a lot of high winds over Japan.
Well, now, was there any attempt to coordinate the bombing with the other planes?
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, to some extent, yes. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, there was some bombing was done, or flying in formation, where the lead bombardier was the only one who actually focused in on the target. And as soon as you saw the bombs go from the lead bombardier, everybody else just
let loose, huh?
Let loose the toggle switch.
Mm-hmm. And so there were 6 missions that you took. And when was the last mission? When was the first and when was the last?
Oh, I don't remember.
But was the war over shortly thereafter, the last mission?
Oh, yeah.
Did they cut you off after the atomic bomb, or
after the second one?
After the second one, you stopped.
Right.
Back on when you were back on your base, were you getting the word of what was happening in the war, so you knew about what to expect?
Well, kind of. We were on Saipan. We were only about 3 miles from Tinian, which was where the 2 planes that dropped the atomic bombs flew from.
Mm-hmm.
And matter of fact, we see planes taken off from their runways from our barracks. But we knew something was going on over there because, you know, we had communication with people over there, and people go over the back, and we knew that there was a group over there who was fenced in and had no contact with anybody, but it was such a well-kept secret that nobody knew what was going on. And that was the cruise of the
atomic bomb.
Planes.
Yeah.
And I think they had they said a couple thousand people involved in that. You know, with the personnel that went along with it. And they were all in a separate compound that had no contact with the rest of the island.
After the war, after the things after hostilities had ended, what did you do?
Well, that was the fun part.
Was it?
We immediately after the war ended, they knew where most of the prisoner of war camps were in Japan, and we converted the B-29s, took out the, of course, no bombs, and hooked up racks with bundles of supplies, food, medicine, stuff like that, and flew over these PW camps and dropped them by these big bundles by parachute. And we got a lot of sightseeing on that too. But that was and also, well, of course, I was overseas, being only 21 years old, probably at that time, and not having a lot of overseas service by the time the war ended, not being married. I had very few. You accumulated points, as you knew.
Yes.
To get back. So I was still over there in September of '46.
Oh.
And we did a lot of things there. And I told you yesterday when we talked, we were on a flying PW mission dropping supplies, and we were going to the northernmost island in Hokkaido. So there's going to be it was on September the 2nd when the armistice was signed on Missouri in Tokyo Bay. And we were supposed to join some other airplanes for a big flyover. And for some reason or other, we didn't hook up with them, and we were over Tokyo by ourselves. And we flew around Mount Fuji, and we flew over the Missouri by ourselves about the time they were signing the armistice. My pilot tells me that if you see film of it, when it comes up this year, he says you'll hear that B-29 flying over there.
You're a B-29.
That's what he tells me now. I don't know for sure, but you know that we also took a lot of Marine brass on sightseeing missions. Of course, they didn't get the opportunity to go to Japan, and we'd take a load of Marine officers, and we'd fly over Hiroshima and Nagasaki and Tokyo, and just to let them observe.
You did see those cities then after they were destroyed. You think you got any radiation flying over there?
Hadn't showed up yet, so. But
must have been an awesome sight.
It was.
What was from all of these emissions, for instance, over Tokyo, the city was pretty...
Oh, virtually wiped out, because they did a lot of incendiary bombing, where they dropped big bundles of incendiary bombs that, when they broke open, they just spread all over and created fires. And of course, the Japanese houses were not too well constructed, and it just burned. It burned a lot of it out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I saw some percentages on how much of the city was destroyed, but I forget what they were.
Which looked worse? Were the atomic bombs that hit, or were the other bombing had gone on?
Probably where the atomic bombs had hit.
Were the other bombing, or the atomic bombs?
Probably atomic bombs.
Mm-hmm. We flew a lot of, in my year after the war over there, we
lot of air rescue missions where, you know, they'd said a plane had gone down, they'd search for a couple of months to see if they could find anybody. And I think I told you when I talked to you, we sent a group of B-29s to Manila for the inauguration of the first Philippine president at post-war, and had a big flyover for that. We spent about 3 days in Manila for that.
The first Philippine president, was that Aquino, or what was his name?
Manuel Quezon.
Quezon, yeah, that's right.
You know, for all the bombing, of course, most of the B-29 started in India, but you know, with the weather, and they bombed some bases in China and Japanese bases, and but the weather wasn't too conducive to air flight there, and that's why they wanted someplace in the Pacific where they could base the B-29s and bomb from there. And as I told you, all the credit goes to the Marines and the Army for recapturing those islands. They recaptured those three that we were on, plus Iwo Jima and Okinawa. And I think I saw some statistics where they had 30,000 Marines and soldiers in the Saipan invasion and lost about probably almost half of them. Just that. And the fighting took place, it was over in 3 weeks. And before the fighting was over, the engineers were in building airfields. And the same way with Okinawa. They were building the field while the fighting was still going on. And we lost a lot of people to take those islands. But they were important islands because they allowed us to set up those airfields.
I assume that after the war is over, you spent some time sightseeing in these various places. Where'd you go?
Well, just over Japan and to Manila. And, the rest of the time was spent on Guam. After the war, when they did away with the group on Saipan and sent us all down to Guam. So that's where I
Not much to do in Guam.
not much to do in Guam. Although I understand is now thriving.
Yes, I guess it is.
As with Okinawa and the others.
When you got to, you went to Manila too, though?
Yes.
And how did you find things there in Manila?
It was busy.
Was it?
Yes.
Lots of soldiers?
Lots of soldiers, lots of people.
Was Manila pretty well intact, or was that destroyed?
Everything seemed to be, by the time when we got there, everything seemed to be back to normal, probably.
What about some of the big brass? Did you see any of them?
No. Just what from the Marine Corps that we'd take on flights. Mostly colonels, probably. Right, like that.
Well, let's take a little recess here. Maybe some other things we can tell us about that.
Well, the plane was pressurized, except in the bomb bays, and a section between the the radar operator and the tail gunner. The tail gunner was more or less isolated from the rest of the plane, except by radio. And he had a little pressurized section of his own, which was probably no more than 6 or 8 feet long, and maybe a little wider, of course, wider than his body, and room for a machine gun. But the plane would maintain some pressure, even if we got a hole in it. But during a bombing run, why everybody put an oxygen mask on just in case something did happen that would cause depressurization of the airplane.
And how high did these?
The bombing runs probably varied from, according to what it was, feet to 30,000 feet, according to what kind of bombs you're dropping. They also use B-29s to drop mines in some of the harbors in Japan. Most of that work was done early when they were in B-29s were in India.
Did you have any mishaps? Did you have any emergency landings or any of that?
No, we had a couple of times we'd lose an engine, and I think once we landed on Iwo Jima, and another time on Okinawa, and just for repairs and take on extra fuel at that time too. Some of the problems with the B-29s were it was such a long trip, and particularly when they flew at high altitude, was they used a lot of gas, and that was why they felt that taking Iwo Jima and Okinawa were number one priorities to provide a place for emergency landings for B-29s.
How much fuel would those things carry?
Well, let's see. Stripped, it weighed about 120,000 pounds, carried about 12,000 pounds of bombs, and the other up to 40, fully loaded was about 140,000 pounds, so had about 8,000 pounds of fuel. You could put, you could lessen the bomb load a little bit and put Bombay tanks in. Most of the fuel was carried in the wings, but I think a small Bombay tank carried something like 700 gallons of fuel. And they sometimes would put a couple of those in. But they didn't like to do that because that reduced the bomb load.
I'd crowd the Bombardier out of space with it.
No, he was up in the nose by himself, and the bombs were back about the center of the plane.
And what about the engines on these planes?
The engines were, I guess, a little suspect all along. I think the four engines, I think they're created about 3,000, I'm not mistaken, about 3,000 horsepower each, and they had a lot of difficulty with them.
What make were those engines, do you know?
They were either Pratt Whitney or Wright.
Were they the radio type?
Yes.
And
no, they were by radio. You couldn't see the well, they were closed. But, they were not jets.
And you each B-29 had how many engines?
It had four engines and a crew of 11 people.
And you could, I think you said that you could fly even if you had only two engines.
That's right.
What happened if, well, did you ever fly on one engine?
I've seen movies. I think when we were down in Tucson, we saw some movies of a B-29 that was flying on one engine, but it was losing altitude, and but it was still flying. See, one of the things you could do is you could shut off an engine if it was running hot or something. Why? Well, in one particular instance, we had an R&R. We flew from Guam to Honolulu for a week at Christmas time, and for R&R, rest and recuperation.
Yeah.
And we flew 21 hours nonstop. And during the course of the flight, they would, when an engine started running hot, they just shut it off. And we probably, during the course of that flight, shut off all the engines at some point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And restart them and cool down. But it was a good airplane.
Well, I think
with all those problems.
Well, Bob covered it. I should say, first of all, as we close here, that our photographer so to speak, is Mike Hall, who is the executive director of the Montgomery County Historical Society, and I'm Bob Wernle, who is on the Oral History Committee. Anything more that you think of, Mike, that we should have covered?
Very interesting.
Bill, we want to thank you.
Well, thank you.
We're going to put, as we've told people, we're going to...
Before you shut it off, can I say one more thing?
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that a lot of people may not realize that came out of this, I mean, one of the things that happened to me that I appreciate everything that happened was after I got out of the service, I was given an education. Went to school on the GI Bill, which I would never have been able to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the greatest pieces of legislation that Congress ever enacted, because I got my books, tuition, $75 a month.
Did you go to school then?
I went to IU then, and I had some credits. Well, when I was in the service, when I went to George Peabody College, my credits from there transferred. I got 80 hours credits for being in the service, and consequently was able to graduate in 3 years. But that was all paid for by the government, and I would never have been able to do that.
Your field is in accounting, isn't it?
That's right.
You went to work for Crawford Industries. Was that your...
Property, and I worked for Plastine for about, 10 years maybe, I forget exactly. But I worked for Crawford Industries then for 19 years and retired in 1987.
Mm-hmm.
But I did want to bring that up, that that was one of the big benefits.
What was your date of separation? When did you come?
I got out, the actual date of separation I think was November of 46, but I think I got out sometime in September probably. Yeah. I got home just in time in 46. I think IU was the only school that had not started, and because they were still doing some building because of the influx of GIs, and so it was about the second week in October before they started school, and that's one of the reasons I went.
When did you get married?
Oh, I met my wife at IU too, and I was married in 1951. That was about 5 years after we met.
Do you have any family?
Yes, I have a son and a daughter who went to school in Crawfordsville. In fact, my son was born about 3 weeks before we moved here.
Are they still in Crawfordsville?
No, my daughter's in Tampa, Florida, and my son's in Franklin, Indiana.
Well, we sure want to thank you, Bill.
I'm happy to do it.
What we do with these tapes, we keep them on, we'll put them over in the public library in the local history room, and we'll maybe try to get you a copy of it so that you will have a record of what you said here. And
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay.